civilmedia.mk. Slobodno, nezavisno, otvoreno.
Good morning, everyone.
Slobodno, nezavisno, otvoreno.
Good morning, everyone.
Slobodno, nezavisno.
I believe we can start now. Good morning, everyone. This is, at the very beginning, I have to say, this is a conference that will be in English language. The working language is English, as much as we have learned and practiced it in the recent decades. However, this is a regional conference, although it also has a couple of distinguished speakers from Germany, so it maybe in a way could be called an international conference from the aspect of the subject and from the aspect of the contributors and speakers. However, this is the first conference in a row that will be organized in partnership with the Balkan Forum and the other organizations in the civil society platform. We'll hear a little bit more about that in a minute. However, this is the conference that we called, it's a long title, Attacks on Democracy and Human Rights. CSOs in support of Western Balkan societies facing disinformation, hate speech, and hybrid attacks. And I welcome you to this conference. My name is Jabir Derala, and I'll be the moderator and the host of the first session of this conference. The first session, or the first panel, is titled How Hybrid Attacks Are Distorting Public Discourse and Endangering Democracies. At the beginning, before we start with our distinguished speakers, the ladies and gentlemen who come from different countries from the region and from Germany, I would like to ask our partner and friend and colleague, Mr. Astrid Istrefi, who is here with us in Skopje, to say a few words about the organization he represents, the Balkan Forum, and of course a few lines about the civil society platform. Welcome to this conference, Mr. Astrid. Please tell us a few words about yourself, about the organization and the platform in a very few minutes.
Very few minutes. Thank you very much, Jabir. Pleasure to be here. I have been here for quite a while, back and forth, so thanks very much for organizing this conference, and I'm sure that we are going to have not only a productive, fruitful discussion here, but also identify steps that can be undertaken to tackle the issues that we have in the agenda for the conference. Okay, so my name is Astrid Istrefi, and I'm from the Balkan Forum, which is a regional multi-sectoral platform designed to advance cross-border dialogue and create a shared regional vision and agenda for cooperative action in the Balkan region based on economic integration, prosperity, and sustainable peace. In our work, we highlight good practices of regional cooperation to policy discussions and promote existing efforts to connect grassroots initiatives, knowledge, and successes to the decision-making levels that are responsible for policymaking and regional plus EU Euro-Atlantic integration processes. A couple of words about the civil society platform. Civil and Balkan Forum are both members, as are about 40 civil society organizations and activists from the Western Balkans region, from the 6 countries. It's quite a diverse platform of organizations. You may have heard about the work that has been undertaken by the civil society platform in the context of Berlin process and related summits. So we have united our efforts to give an example to show that we can work together and create a united front in tackling the issues that are holding back the democracy, the progress, and the future of our countries. And so what we have done is presented joint statements and manifestos to London Summit in 2018, and then Poznan, Sofia, and lastly, the Berlin Summit that were taking place within the Berlin process in general. Together with civil society platform from the Western Balkan 6, including Bulgaria and Greece, we are working to strengthen the relationship and collaboration between civil society, between media, youth, academia, diaspora, and business sectors in the Balkan region. In terms of today's conference, I think, Jabir did the opening, but I would like to say from myself and emphasize a couple of critical issues that I believe we are dealing with. But to start with is that we are witnessing different forms of warfare, extremely sophisticated but not unnoticed or undetected, that are threatening our countries and societies and are having a severe impact in our democracies and in disturbing peace and progress in our region. Propaganda, disinformation, fake news, however we name them or define them, are proving to be enormously influential in not only disseminating and mobilizing, but in almost having a decisive impact in elections, in referendums, peace and EU Euro-Atlantic integration processes, including in the current pandemic and vaccination. I think we are witnessing that there is plenty of evidence of such a threat to our countries and societies. These forms of warfare are utilized by various actors across the globe and in our region to strengthen their patronage networks, aid transnational crime and corruption, deepen inter and intra-state and community divisions, distract social cohesion, and support raising authoritarianism and ethno-nationalist policies and rhetoric in our countries, which is very unfortunate. This is why we are finding ourselves in such a position that we seem to have lost our capabilities to predict, let alone anticipate, such profound threats that are making our future more insecure. What is also proven is that we find it easier to blame X, Y, and Z and identify and or assess the impact, but less so in taking the blame ourselves for not acting on time and decisively to protect our democracies, our countries and societies from becoming more vulnerable and less resilient to such threats. So the point is today that at this conference we are looking beyond of identifying, assessing the impact. We are focusing on how we can become more vigilant and acting individually and collectively to counter such threats. Therefore, it is a great privilege and honor to listen to distinguished speakers whose expertise, knowledge, and views on most frequent types and sources of disinformation, hate speech, and hybrid attacks will be revealed today, and how institutions and societies are dealing with these issues or phenomena, and what are the best practices proven to be successful. I think we can learn a lot from each other. We can learn a lot from other examples. There is plenty of evidence. What we need to do is work on them and build on the successes that we are witnessing today. Thank you, Jabir.
Thank you, my dear friend Astrid, Mr. Istrefi. That was a very important point to make, and I'd like to share with the audience that the Balkan Forum and Civil are part of the civil society platform that is issuing numerous recommendations, policy documents that are considered seriously by international community, by governments, as well as the Berlin process itself. in the recent months, and also last month another document that has been tackling the issue of free movement of citizens in the region. That is, according to me, quite important point to make as well, in order to present the importance of this platform, of which we are part of. I think this is a very high time to recognize a fact that the democratic and progressive societies are threatened by the abuse of the democratic instruments themselves. More precisely, democracies are under attack by sophisticated, complex, and persistent propaganda machineries, but also by intelligence and counterintelligence agencies, underground and criminal structures, fake civil societies, civil society organizations, religious circles, even businesses, media, academia, etc., etc. All of them are a part of the hybrid warfare that is waged by authoritarian regimes by quite some time now, and particularly intensified after the invasion of the Russian Federation on Ukraine in 2014. Socio-political circumstances within the country, the region, and much wider are such that provide unlimited, practically unlimited space for fierce disinformation and hate campaigns against progressive individuals and groups in the society. The aim is to discredit prominent opinion makers, media, civil society organizations, local and central government institutions, even in science, to discredit the science itself in order to strip them from the confidence of the public in their reports, activities, analysis, measures, and other relevant outputs of their work and positions and mandates and missions. The attacks against civil society activists and journalists are countless. It is not just a hate propaganda by some angry group or radicals and bitter trolls. It is more than obvious that the whole propaganda machinery stands behind the multi-year continuous attacks on civil society actors, particularly those that are visible and influential, active on daily basis. I would start this conference with this point, and as a humble introduction to a very important person to us, Dr. Wolfgang Ressmann, who is the chairman, the head of the Federal Association of Citizen Media, as well as the chairman of the Youth for Media Network. Quite an expert in the circumstances that are ongoing in Eastern Europe, particularly in Belarus, as well as Ukraine and other countries that are facing troubles with democracy, freedom of speech, and the rule of law. Good morning, Dr. Ressmann. Thank you for being with us today. You are kindly invited to share some of your experiences and your opinion, your analysis about what is going on worldwide, but especially in the region that you're covering as an expert, as well as the head of your organizations.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Darella, for the invitation to this important conference. Thank you that you introduced what I do. Behind on the screen, you see this media dialogue symbol or logo. I am working since 2015. It was the year after the Maidan protests and after the so-called real Ukrainian revolution, supported by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Germany. And our project means putting together universities, journalist organizations, on the national level artists to think about the topics you also have on the in the Balkan region, the whole problems with Russia propaganda, with fake news and destabilization of democratic societies. And I think it's not only a problem in the Balkan region, is a problem in whole Europe with different on different stages, let us say me in this way. I want to start with a short report about the situation in Germany. We also have in Germany Russian propaganda. We have Russia Today, this TV station I think you know well, and this one and the so-called news, a lot of news of them are connected to the right-wing populists, the whole complex of corona opponents, that's the core of an anti-democratic movement, to the right-wing populists supporting Putin at Moscow and so on. And so we have also a lot of let's say real fights in the audience and the public with fake news and propaganda, especially the Russian propaganda. But it's only a small minority what we have in Germany, about 10% at the election, what this right-wing populists and the anti-democrats are getting on votes on the federal level. In the European Union, you know, we have several problems too. We have the right-wing populists and nationalists in Hungary. We have them in Poland and Slovenia too. And it shows that, and we have it in Croatia nationally, the nationalist forces, which are, and they all work together also in a network in Europe to fight against this democratic structure of the European Union. So, and in between is the Balkan problematic. And this was also the point where I have contact and information exchange with Mr. Darella since several years, comparable with the situation in the Eastern Partnership countries. I said that I started 2015 in Ukraine. And meanwhile, we are working with Georgia, with Armenia, with Moldova, and especially Belarus, and everywhere the same problems appear in a very dangerous form. Frozen conflicts on the one side, in the Ukraine, the open war, but the destabilization of society is on a very, very high level. But the destabilization is also in Georgia visible. The politics of Russia in Armenia after the war and after the attack of the Turkish and Azerbaijani forces in the Karabakh war some month ago gave Russia the chance to send troops to this region again. We have the frozen conflict in Moldova with Transnistria, the occupied territories in Georgia, and it's all combined with Russian propaganda and media influence in this former Soviet republics. And I think one of the main point is when we have a look at the whole Europe landscape, that the idea to rebuild the old empires. The one empire is the Soviet Union, to rebuild it and with all zones of influence from Russia's side. This is one of the problems we have, and one of the reasons we are talking about hate speech, disinformation, and hybrid war attacks. And on the other side, we have also the Turkish thinking of to rebuild the old Osmanian empire. This is one of the reasons of the Karabakh war so I believe, and I'm sure that that is right. When we talk about based on these issues, We have also, I think, positive, a very positive thing that we have a lot of supporters of democracy, human rights, and so on in Europe, in the former Soviet republics, and on the Balkan too. Democracy. We have all to fight for democracy every day, and we have supporters. And this is, I think, the big difference to the Cold War, times. And we have to use our forces against this Russia propaganda, our media, to tell about the backgrounds of the kleptocratic regimes, which are not ideological based. In my view, they only want to get money and to make their influence bigger, to get even more money and more power. And like you see in Belarus, this is a dictatorship. Unbelievable in the 20th century. Nobody has believed that that could be possible, that all journalists which are independent are in jail or in the countries of Western Europe and Eastern Europe. The head of the Belarus journalist organization, Andrei Bastunets, a good friend of mine and member of Media Dialogue, is at the moment in Georgia, his deputy in Ukraine. So, and we have journalists under pressure in the whole Balkan area too. It's the same base, and we have the same front lines where we have to fight, and we have to fight for peace too. I think. Also, this is very dangerous for peace in Europe. We have this open war in Ukraine. We have this frozen conflicts and war situation in Armenia and Azerbaijan, and we have a very, very critical situation. In my view, you know it, I think, much better than I, in the whole Balkan region. So that our task is to inform the audience about the backgrounds, the networks of right populism, the networking of the Russian propaganda system, and to tension ourselves against these powers, and we have to make it open to the media system to report about it. And we have to work together. We have to work together between the EU and the Balkan countries, which are waiting to become member or on the door at the EU. And we have also to work together with the democratic societies, or the building of democratic societies in the countries of Eastern Partnerships and the former Soviet republics. We must built a really for and power against this propaganda and the kleptocrats and new dictators in Europe. And I think your conference is one of the ways I would like. It would be great if we have a chance perhaps to combine Media Dialogue East to have a Media Dialogue on a project on Balkan 2 in the future. You can have a look at our website. I will share it in the link. So that is my statement. I am very lucky to meet you all here, knowing that we are all on the right side of democracy, human rights, and fighting against the ones who want to destabilize our democratic Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Reisman. I believe that your agenda is quite tight. I think you told me you're traveling today already, right after this conference, and you will continue expanding the struggle, the projects that are trying to help democracies, help societies to tackle these real serious issues and phenomena. In your really precious and I would say exclusive share of information and analysis, you, I have to say, reminded me slightly to an analysis published recently on civilmedia.mk by Alexander Nikolic Pisarev, who was also writing about the resurrection of the shadows, of the old shadows in the Balkans and elsewhere, with the imperialist tendencies integrated within their strategies, or at least it seems so. Especially important is to share openly and directly, based on arguments and evidence that you partly shared with us about the kleptocratic regimes that only have one and only goal, and that is power and money, more precisely. With this thought, I would like to pass the microphone virtually to Mr. Nenad. No, sorry, I have somebody else in the agenda before that, Mr. Abid Hoxha. Mr. Abid Hoxha is coming from the Institute of Nordic. He's a researcher at the Institute of Nordic and Media Studies at the University of Agder in Norway, and his PhD is titled Conflict News Production at LMU Munich. Could you, Mr. Hoxha, Dr. Hoxha, say a few words, share your analysis and your findings about how the attacks against democracies is composed, how it is conducted, and what is it to be done in this respect?
Thank you, Jabir. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Greetings,
yes.
everyone. I'm very pleased to be with all of you today. Some of you I know personally, and some of you I'm getting to know, and I'm very pleased for that. So my work is centered around news production in conflict and in absence of conflict, or what I call the generic news production and conflict news production. And but what I'm currently doing is connected to, I'm not sure why, but I'm hearing there's someone's speaker is I can hear someone.
Echo.
If you can mute.
There's an echo.
Yes.
Everybody needs to mute themselves, if I may suggest.
Thank you, Nenad. So what I'm currently doing is that I'm working on a EU-funded project on revisiting the past and anticipating the future, which connects very much with what Dr. Ressman said about the reinventing of, or the rediscovering of the empires. And we're looking at the European troubled past. It strikes me, as someone coming from Kosovo originally, when I went and went beyond the research on Kosovo and in the Balkans, it strikes me how young our democracies are in Europe. If we are thinking about Spain and Portugal, about Greece and about Cyprus, how young these democracies are. Within my lifetime, Spain transitioned into democracy, for example. And we are not thinking how fragile these democracies are as well. So I just want to say like a couple of things. First of all, it's important to define attacks by who, and I think there is a wider consensus in Eurosphere, so to say, that we have an adversary that is injecting news and media productions, so-called news, through disinformation campaigning in Europe, but also in the Balkans, especially in the Balkans, in fragile societies such as Kosovo and Macedonia, Bosnia, Serbia, to some extent. And having said that, we cannot ignore the fact that actually European countries, as Dr. Ressman said, are not immune to that. We've seen a lot what's happening in Slovenia. We've seen a lot what's happening in Hungary. We've seen social movements, emerging social movements in Greece and in Germany and in other countries as well, that not only look at the fake news and disinformation and hybrid attacks, but they're looking at the weaker point on this whole structure of or function of public sphere. They're looking at the trust, and decline of trust is one of the most important bottlenecks in this area. The whole point of fake news and disinformation is not to believe that cows are flying in Russia. It is to decline trust in real news in Germany about German internal politics, about local politics, about gender issues, about migration, the numbers about migration, the numbers about the pandemic situation, the infections, the vaccines, the effectivity of vaccines. When we say this, and I cannot not think about something that probably Dr. Ressman is more familiar with, something called fortified democracy or militaristic democracies, which is, when democracies use their own tools, legal tools, to limit freedom of expression. And what I'm going to say is going to sound probably a little controversial, but for example, in Germany, it's fully illegal to display Nazi symbols, such as swastika and Nazi propaganda, and for a very good reason. But this is done using democratic tools. We've seen a similar path of actions taken by governments in Hungary, in Slovenia, and Balkans inevitably, where governments try to restrain media from publishing information regarding to the pandemic situation. And these are internal factors. This is not someone in Russia telling someone in Kosovo, send the police to the media. This is a practice that is used as a democracy. The other important thing is that we're all in Europe struggling with democracy. And democracy is, I can still hear a massive echo. Democracy is not something that is a set of rules that is...
Abid, forgive me for intruding, but as a former radio person, I probably think probably the echo is coming from the room where the organizers are. So I would suggest that they make sure that their microphones are down whilst everybody else is speaking. Otherwise, this will continue. Sorry, I'll shut up.
Okay, can we hear? Okay, now. So one of the things, well, as I was saying, one of the things that we see is internal struggle with democracy, and democracy is bottom-up. It's almost never a top-down process. And the process of bottom-up democracies become very fragile when you have authoritarian political leadership that don't want to embrace fully democratic practices. We have confirmed reports, Council of Europe reports of the Russian influence on media content in Europe. Just recently, the report on state of democracy, human rights, and rule of law, the Council of Europe report, states that during 2018 to 2020, respect for freedom of expression was in decline in many countries, meaning many member countries of the Council of Europe. And this is worrying because these are democratic institutions that member states adhere to. And this is a report that is criticizing itself for declining democracies. So I don't want to go too much into details and prolong my talk here, because I think we're also limited in terms of time. But in a book by Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt called How Democracies Die, one of the bottlenecks of declining democracies or democracies dying is the function of gatekeepers. We have to rethink in today's technological reality, we have to rethink the gatekeeper function. I have researched for the last 15 years in media and journalistic practices And I've never met a politician who wants to be scrutinized or submits to being scrutinized or verified by the media. So a rough conclusion is that political leaders do not like the media precisely because of the function they have to actually verify what they say, to treat it with these editorial policies and structural way of verifying information. And this function has been diluted to some extent with the rise of social media, with the rise of democratization of communication everywhere, which brings a lot of positive things and positive changes, brings a lot of voices, but also comes with a price. The other, it's again the echo, but the other thing that I wanted to say here is that from the Kosovar perspective, and only a fraction of my research is focused on Kosovo, we have to look at countries from a sort of comprehensive perspective. Whereas in country where I live now in Norway, we score the best in freedom of expression. Norway always is in top 3 or top 4 of countries with media sort of media freedom, and Kosovo scores halfway in the ranking. But we have to see this as a process, as a comprehensive process, from education to other factors that influence this overall quality of democracy that we live in. The quality of democracy depends directly on the quality of journalism. There's a German saying that I don't want to embarrass myself by mispronouncing it, but your democracy is as good as your journalism, or as good as your freedom of the press. And we have to see, how do we fix these problems through a comprehensive approach? And the comprehensive approach is that we haven't thought about the necessary reforms on education. And education comes from primary to secondary to high schools to university, in the field of media literacy and information literacy, in the field of understanding political participation as not only a responsibility of active citizenship, but also as an obligation to a functioning democracy. We need to also think about the tools by which we measure trust. Trust, you can be a political leader for 10 years and then you have one little scandal about non-verified information and your career goes up the flames. You can be Mother Teresa for 20 years and then you get one media content that destroys your entire career without verified proof. So now we are at a stage where we cannot decline all these, we cannot undo all these developments. So, for example, and I will end with this, Kosovo has roughly 1.7 million inhabitants and has 2 million SIM cards that provide internet. So by definition, more than the adults have more than one SIM card that provides internet. The other thing is Kosovo has like the largest number of inhabitants with internet access, not only as households as well. So internet penetration is 96%. And the way information is distributed in Kosovo does not depend on television, does not depend on, we don't even have printed newspapers anymore for a year now in Kosovo. But it completely is based on distribution by Facebook and YouTube, IPTV, and other internet-based platforms. Just to end with a futuristic note, if I may, Mark Zuckerberg just announced that Facebook will be a metaverse company, not a social media anymore. So they want to build a reality whereby you don't need to even go physically to school, or you don't even need to go to a political institution for your birth certificate, etc. But you can do all that via Facebook. So we need to rethink education, we need to rethink democracy, we need to rethink trust in media and in political system, as well as political participation to cultivate our democracy. And just to add to that saying of your democracy is as good as your freedom of the press, I would like to add that your democracy is as good as your participation in that democracy and making what do you make of that freedom of the press and freedoms that we have. And freedoms don't only come as a sort of God-given, nature-given, whatever given rights, but they come with certain responsibilities that we have to cultivate and fulfill all the time. So I don't have a recipe for how to fix all these things, but in terms of policy, I think that we cannot fix them by training journalists, training politicians to better communicate. We have to fix them from the bottom up, from all the way structural approach, which is comprehensive. Sorry for
Thank you.
going over time.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it was over time, but it was very interesting to hear these standpoints and findings. About Facebook, I also would like to say quite a few things, but I will refrain now for the sake of the agenda. But I will only mention the New Zealand's Prime Minister back in time after the attack on the mosque in New Zealand in 2019. In March, I think it was. So it says a lot. The statement of the New Zealand's Prime Minister says a lot there. But I'd like to rush ourselves a little bit into the agenda and go to Mr. Nenad Šebek, who has 3 decades or so journalistic experience. Somebody who was the executive director of a very important center for democracy and reconciliation in Southeast Europe, and he was a director of the Heinrich Böll Foundation in the Belgrade office. Good morning, Mr. Šebek. Good to have you here. Thank you for your radio experience, trying to tackle with our echo. But I just got a message from my colleague here. Maybe the speakers don't need to listen to themselves via their devices. They could only just speak. I hope that will also help. So, Mr. Šebek, in your really extensive experience that you gathered over the years and decades of professional experience, would you care to share your findings about the topic, about the attacks on the democracy and human rights, about the hybrid attacks of of the democracies in Europe and across the world, of course, and particularly in the Western Balkans countries?
Thank you very much for a very kind introduction, and thank you very much to Dr. Esman and to Abid for their very interesting contributions. Let me kick off by reacting to some of the things which they said. I think very importantly is Abid's reminder of how young our democracies are. And we're not talking just about the post-communist countries, we're talking also about what we consider to be normally mature democracies like Spain or Greece, which they are actually not. The second thing that Abid mentioned is let us not look for Russian influence behind every tree, because a lot of the hybrid warfare, which is linked to Russia, is, however, homegrown and is more related to internal political situations in the countries that we talk about. And there, let me again pick up on something that Dr. Esman mentions, which is that autocratic regimes are all about getting power and getting money. This is very, very true. Florian Bieber coined the term for the Balkan countries, stabilitocracies. I can now hear an echo of my voice. Let me kill off my headphones. That should be okay. I hope it'll be okay now. So Bieber coined the term stabilitocracies. I tend to call these countries single-party kleptocracies. So Dr. Esman, very, very true. It's all about gathering power, and gathering power is about gathering money. Now, let me go back a little bit to the history of hybrid attacks. First of all, this is nothing new. During the Cold War era, it was called PSYOPs, psychological operations. Both superpowers engaged heavily into it, even going as far as to trying out paranormal phenomena like implanting thoughts via psychics. Then let me go way back into history and go into what in journalism is considered to be the first war reportage that ever appeared in the media. It goes back to the era of the Trojan War, and we are talking about the Iliad by Homer. Now, for a moment, let us assume that Homer actually existed and that the Iliad is a true account of a war which happened. In that case, we can consider the Iliad and the Odyssey to be the first war reportages ever written. Who do we have there? Who is our neutral observer, which is what a journalist should be? Well, Homer belonged to the Achaean side. He was a Greek. He was against the Trojans. So can we really count upon his objectivity? Or if we want to go even further back and consider a story from the Bible about the expulsion of Adam and Eve from Eden, who are the persons appearing in that newspaper story? We have God, we have Adam, we have Eve, we have the snake, and we have the archangel. They're all participants in this story. They're not objective observers. So who was the neutral observer? Who's there? News gets slanted all the time, and they have happened forever. If we look at the American Civil War, for example, the middle of the 19th century, this is we have the first documented evidence that one side in a war is trying to actually buy influence in a neutral country. In this case, the Confederacy sent its agent to London with the purpose of buying influence in English media. This agent was very meticulous about noting his expenses. So what he did was he actually asked the journalists who were receiving money, bribes from him, to sign receipts. And he sent these receipts back to Atlanta, to where the seat of the Confederacy was. These receipts are still alive and today, and they're actually the first documented proof of how you can actually buy media influence. So what is actually new about hybrid warfare is simply the technology, and Abid pointed out to that very, very well. The technology that we have available today allows for a far wider and also far deeper reach than we have ever experienced in the history of the world. In my personal opinion, there are 6 things that we need to do to counter these kinds of threats. And these 6 things are media literacy, media literacy, media literacy, and support to the independent media, support to the independent media, support to the independent media. It's not 2, it's 6, because I'm on purpose amplifying the importance of these 2 elements. As long as we have the media literacy, for example, we are focusing on the Balkans, obviously, today. As long as we have media literacy at the low levels that we have today, it is no wonder that people will pick up on fake news, that they will not recognize fake civil society organizations, so-called gongos. They will not recognize fake media. In Serbia, for example, there's an independent outlet called Južne Vesti. And again, I'm hearing the echo, and I'm hearing it very loud. Let me see what I can about. Hope that the technicians can do something about it. I could. And this portal, which was an independent portal and still is, basically there was another portal appearing using the same name and a very similar logo and towing the government's line. So people without media literacy, people will not be able to recognize the difference between genuine news and fake news. By the way, I hate the term fake news because something is either news or it is a lie. There is no fake news as such, but since Donald Trump introduced the phrase fake news, everybody's talking about that, myself included. And lastly, one more thing about Russian propaganda. In Serbia, for example, specifically, the Russians do not even need to invest money or effort because there is a huge amount of pro-Russian sympathy already there. Similarly, the situation is very much alike in the Republika Srpska, the Bosnian Serb entity of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Elsewhere, it doesn't really work. It isn't useful. It used to be in North Macedonia during the Gruevski era, but it is not the case now. And I think I will stop here. A, my time has run out. B, the echo is becoming impossible.
Thank you. Am I on? Thank you for your presentation. apologies to the audience. I hope that it's not the same with the audience that is online. I believe that the echo you're hearing is only within the link that you have with us here, probably also due to other technical issues. However, I thank you for what you shared, and I will really rush forward with the agenda, although I have quite a few comments to make about what you just shared with the audience, with us. And I would like to invite Mrs. Amina Shurkovic, if she's still online with us.
Yes, I hear you.
Yes, Amina, Mrs. Shurkovic is an activist with the Initiative Against Religious and Racial Intolerance, Prvi initiative, more precisely, established in 2017 with an aim to protect the freedom of religion and belief in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Good morning, Mrs. Shurkovic. Please, can you share with us about how the attacks on democracy and human rights is being conducted in your society, and what can we do about this? Please share your experience as well.
Hello, everyone. I would first like to thank you for hosting this very important event, and I feel very honored to be able to provide my perspective on these challenges and to listen invited experts from the other organizations and countries. Since it is a phenomenon that affects almost all aspects of human life, and it can be viewed from the angles of various scientific disciplines, I was thinking about what to focus on today. So I decided to go back to my background, criminology, and try to explain hybrid ethics and disinformation from a criminological point of view, along with prevention, of course, in context of Bosnia and Herzegovina. In December, as we all know, in 2018, the European Union adopted an action plan against disinformation, recognizing it as a serious threat to democratic processes. However, such activities were absent in the Western Balkans, where hybrid ethics were not recognized by government actors, academia, or media professionals in the region. In the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, the awareness of this issue is even less presented than in neighboring countries. Hybrid threats are increasingly difficult to monitor, to anticipate, and to respond to. The actual state of hybrid ethics is not covered by any statistics. In criminology, we have the crime triangle, which identifies three factors that create a criminal offense. I will try to use the same model to explain hybrid ethics in the context of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So the first factor is the intention. The individual or the group must have the ability and knowledge. Here is very important to emphasize the difference between lies and factual errors. A person may make a factually incorrect statement, believing it to be true. It is the intention to deceive that separates these two categories, and it is a key element of political misinformation. The second factor that criminologists are very interested in are the attackers, people or groups who are behind the spreading disinformation and hybrid ethics. It is impossible to create one profile that suits all of them, but some common motives are entertainment, profit, political, of course, motives, anger, revenge, and other emotional needs. I will mention here because it can lead us to founder of the academic discipline of cybercriminology, Jay Shankar, who developed the space transition theory of cybercrimes, which tries to explain why people behave so differently when they move to cyberspace. One of the postulates of this theory, which is very important for our context, is flexibility of identity, anonymity, and lack of distraction factors in cyberspace. Individuals sometimes they commit acts in groups that they would never do individually, which is part of that mass mentality. Examples are politically motivated cyber criminals who are members of extremist and radical groups and use the internet to spread propaganda, to attack websites or their political enemies. Of great interest to the criminologist is actually the way of committing the offense. When it comes to hybrid attacks, it is very difficult to trace the profile of attackers based on the modus operandi. The distance between the place where individuals or groups operate and the target is irrelevant, and it is meaningless in the context of cyberspace, where distance does not exist. One of the key findings of research conducted in 2018 and 2019 in Bosnia and Herzegovina, based on the resulting material of the Bosnian fact-checking platform, was actually that anonymity. Anonymous portals in Bosnia and Herzegovina are the type of media that appears as the main source and transmitter of misinformation in the online space. In most cases, their primary motive for producing such content is the commercial profit. On the other hand, the findings indicate that some of these portals were established by political actors as a means of attacking political opponents by placing inaccurate information and accusation against them. Anonymity is used in these cases as a way to avoid public criticism and responsibility for such actions. And I will end with the third factor of this criminal triangle, which is opportunity. Opportunity for the attack to be committed, which means disinformation to be transmitted. The goal of prevention strategy from the criminological point of view here is to make it more difficult for a potential offender to access a target, which means increase the risk of being caught. Unlike broadcasters in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the print and online media have no legal or regulatory obligation to publish registration, to publish contact or ownership information. Most online platforms are not under any kind of supervision. In such circumstances, there are no obstacles to the existence of anonymous platforms that use misinformation in the service of the goals of a particular political party, while at the same time protecting the person who managed them from any responsibility. So we have to increase the offender's effort to commit a crime. To transfer the misinformation, reduce the gain that individuals and groups are expecting after transmitting misinformation. As Mr. Nenad said, this can only be accomplished by increased critical thinking skills of population and media literacy. Because in Bosnia, there is still widespread perception among citizens that cybercrime, hybrid attacks, disinformation are not such a dangerous phenomenon. Misinformation is poorly or not at all recognized as a possible hybrid threat, and there is almost no public debate about possible responses to such threats. So low awareness of cybersecurity and media literacy makes population more vulnerable to crime and a suitable audience for manipulation. So I will stop here. I don't know, it's loud, so we
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Shurkovic. This was a very, very important aspect of our theme that we're discussing at this conference today, really completing the whole picture of and the whole mosaic of the ideas and the directions of thinking and acting against the hybrid warfare outputs that are witnessed by the societies across the world, and especially in the Western Balkans, because we live here, we feel it the most, of course. However, I thank you for this really important, again, this point aspect of criminology, of the criminological point of view of these issues. It is important to also mention that the hybrid attacks are practically invisible until the effects from these activities are being felt in the society at a great extent. I won't continue with this comment, of course, because we need to rush through the agenda, because we wasted a bit of time with our technical issues, but I believe that it is important what we are talking about today, and each and every speaker has provided a unique and extremely important, valuable input into this conference. I believe we will continue like that with Mrs. Amina Shemsovic, if we are online. Amina, are we, can you hear us? Are we online with Mrs. Shemsovic? Mrs. Shemsovic is, she has a nice and long biography. I have it in front of me, but I'd like to only stress the fact that she has contributed to the 2018 and 2019 European Islamophobia report with her chapter on Montenegro. Maybe we could start there with Mrs. Shemsovic, who I ask kindly to share her standpoints, her experiences in the area of the hybrid attacks on democracies and human rights, particularly. Please.
Hello everyone. I would just like to apologize. I couldn't join before, and I couldn't hear my previous week speaking. I had some technical issues, but luckily I'm here now. So I will be really short and try to give my input on this topic. Although I consider a question is a little bit too big, right? We could speak about it for hours, but from the perspective of a researcher, and well, I can say that speaking of Serbia and Serbian context, we have a good legal context and legal framework. Unfortunately, we do not have that in practice. So yeah, of course, hybrid attacks are pretty much present, especially in huge growth of racism, nationalism, hate speech, hate crimes. But unfortunately, when you see that on the paper, everything looks fine, everything can be prosecuted. But in the practice, very few cases have seen their end and have seen their justice, right? Especially speaking in the case of minorities, speaking of ethnic, religious, national minorities. In our experience, when we talk about media, especially in media landscape, I can say that unfortunately, as for the last year, 2020, I haven't seen the cases that had their justice in the court, right? That's unfortunately, I mean, maybe you have caught on the news that Serbia, according to the Freedom House report, it's not considered a democracy anymore, right? So we have, it's also a little bit to speak about these problems that unfortunately are considered to be smaller than the problems we had currently, right? We have way bigger scandals and affairs, and then when we actually about hybrid attacks, and we are not considered as serious as we should be, unfortunately.
Thank you for sharing this experience with us, and of course, it's a very good point to make that when the activists are under attack and when they complain, usually institutions are either not capable enough to understand the topic or they're not ready to take any action. And of course, it is important to take all these things seriously, especially as Mrs. Shurkovic mentioned before. This is also in the areas of crime, and the institutions have legal obligations towards their citizens to protect them and to serve them for the sake of the democracy, for the sake of their security, and of course for the sake of their human rights and freedoms, their dignity. If you have finished, are you done?
I would just like to add an example and just to show how that looks like in practice when hybrid attacks really grow into something. Like 2 years ago, we had a case of a journalist who was he was actually a local journalist investigating local corruption, and he was attacked and had he was a victim of several attacks, right? But he was, of course, not taken seriously. And everything ended with a really huge incident when his house was set on fire. Of course, the person who did this was never caught, and even everything led to the political sphere. But of course, on the court, everything is still 2 years later, nothing resolved, right? And of course, when we speak about especially journalist profession is not anymore considered to be safe profession in Serbia.
That's a very good addition to your experience and your findings. We have experienced as an organization, and also our fellow colleagues and activists across our country back in time during the regime of Gruevski. We've experienced quite a lot of things that remind me of what you just shared now. There is a good news, actually. Yesterday we heard the Justice Minister Maricic, who announced the fact that in future there will be a legal consequence against anybody who attacks journalists. As an attack, it will be considered by the law as an attack on an official, which is quite a move forward to make a really further difference from what we were experiencing until only 4 years ago. I would like to move forward with our next speaker, Mr. Erjon Curaj. Mr. Erjon Curaj is our last speaker on the first session. I would only share that he's an expert in business development, innovation, and digital transformation. Dr. Curaj is also, he also avails of a blended professional experience in academia, CSOs, the public and private sectors, etc., etc. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Curaj. Could you kindly share your experiences, your standpoints and findings about the topic, how hybrid attacks are affecting democracies and human rights in particular, in your experience in Albania and elsewhere, according to what you have experienced so far or researched so far. Please.
Well, thank you very much for organizing such an event. Honored to be here. Indeed, my perspective, let's say, such a topic of my heart actually is indeed a very crucial point at this context or this reality. Actually, as mentioned, So I'm also a German automotive coordinator at a project sponsored by EU, working on digital transformation and digital agenda of EU, actually, inherited and somehow embedded into EU context. I'll try to shorten my speech as at the end. Actually, my takeaways at the end. So, let's say the keywords will be quadruple helix, digital rights, digital literacy, and CSOs. So let's try to glue them together. Actually, I think that I believe that all the matter we're discussing. So in order to be not so vulnerable, our region against such attacks regarding democracy, we need hardly to point and focus on digital rights and digital literacies, which definitely, as Nenad mentioned before, David, includes as well media literacy. But so that's the way how we want to tackle it. But definitely, in order to do that, we should be inclusive. I'll not take it so. That's the point. So CSOs. So that's what we're discussing actually here. They can support this awareness raising and capacity development actually of citizens to access different digital services, particularly for those, as mentioned before, social groups that cannot have necessary skills, knowledge, or have the necessary infrastructure to do so. For instance, marginalized communities, vulnerable groups, rural youth, elderly, as mentioned before. Not before, I have many cases here, so they see media saying so a lie, as I mentioned before, and everybody believe it because they have learned on traditional medias have proved information and using there, and so they believe what is also in digital medias. So this is something we have to work actually from very young ages, as Abid mentioned also before. So for these reasons, we need to work so young ages and throughout life and life learning for this all the different ages of our region. So that's this point. So digital rights protection is actually the cornerstone of digital democracy. So CSOs can monitor the quality of public digital services and hold the government accountable and push for more transparency. Because we mentioned before from third parties, from China and Russia, but actually we have the same issue might come from the government themselves. As you mentioned before, autocracy is one of our issues in our region. So we have to, for CSOs can play a role also to take the government more accountable and to be more transparent. So this can be done as a coalition between CSOs and media. CSOs actually need to advocate for a policy dialogue with all stakeholders for the enhancement of strategic and legal framework on digitalization and data protection, something which in our region is quite in baby steps. So, and that's a problem. We have the case last year, some months ago, about 1 million of, let's say, data provided from the government system. And this data on 1 million citizens have been used for, let's say, election purposes. And actually, so this is not actually a problem. The problem is that the citizens themselves, they didn't care. They didn't thought that this is some data breach of their protection. And so that's what worries me. So that's why they need to have more knowledge, more culture on what is this data, what their rights about the digital data, and etc. Private data. So CSO needs to facilitate this process, and they need to cooperate with academia, supporting schools in project development for digital competencies through mobility and exchange of experiences, capacity building for teachers and professors. So the CSOs need to partner also with the business sector for digital skills and reskilling for labor force. So here we see that how they all go together. So we see academia, we see so education sector, we see private sector, we see government, we saw CSOs. So all this together, they have to play quite a crucial role altogether. As mentioned before, what is very important, we have to focus in here. So how we all CSOs can play this vital role in our democracies in order to start tackling digital rights, digital literacy, working with academia, working with private sector, and raising awareness on digital rights and democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Tsurai. I see that we somehow managed to stay in the agenda's framework, although unfortunately we are running out of time for discussion part of this first session, but I can see in the agenda that there is a longer part at the end of the second agenda for more notes and questions. I believe that our audience will also have a lot of questions regarding the things that will be said, the experiences, the standpoints, in the second session. Of course, please, if you can, stay with us regardless of the fact that you have been in the first session. You are most welcome to also follow the second session, and at the end of the second session we can all discuss about the topics that are part of our conference today. Of course, I also have several notes made during the first session, and I kindly report myself as one of the commentators at the end of the second session. Thank you all for being with us today. Thank you, Astrid, for being with me at the panel in the physical space, unlike the first session of the conference. The second one will be predominantly physical, with physical presence of our speakers, so it will be in about less than 10 minutes until we change the scenery and the seats in this conference room in Skopje. Thank you all once again. See you in less than 10 minutes.
civilmedia.mk. Slobodno, nezavisno, otvoreno.
Gut. So. Okay. Erzähl doch was über dein 40 Woman Magazine plus online, und das ist doch spannend genug.
If you could please all mute yourself, and then when I mention your name, you will go ahead with unmuting
Ja,
the
ich bin
microphone.
morgen früh dann.
Thank you.
Ne, düs ich dann, ja, bin ich mal gespannt, ob du denk bitte dran, du musst dich noch anmelden in Estland. Nee, du musst dich dann noch offiziell beim Gesundheitsministerium anmelden. Ich habe es nämlich auch erst, aber ich habe auch schon die Links stehen.
civilmedia.mk. Slobodno, nezavisno, otvoreno.
Good afternoon, respected speakers at the conference, dear guests, media representatives and friends of media platform of Civil on Facebook, Twitter and all other channels that we have. Thank you for attending and thank you for following this conference. After very insightful perspectives, I might say, that we heard in the first panel, in the second panel of the conference we seek answers to the question: how did disinformation disrupt the public discourse and encourage radically insulting rhetoric and hate speech? To give their valuable thoughts and experience on these issues, we have with us experienced and prominent members of the civil society, experts, activists from media and civil society, representatives of media from several countries and from Europe, who will be sharing with us their own experiences and best European and regional practices in the area. I should say that this phenomenon is endangering democracies in the region. I believe that we all have and share this opinion in Europe and in the world by looking at the public discourse of the public and the media in the region, especially on social networks. It looks like this type of rhetoric is quite present and often quite dominant. But even more important is to share our thoughts on the ways forward. Is there a recipe for the institutions, especially for the media, for civil society, which would work in dealing with these trends that endanger democracy in its essence? With these thoughts, I would like to give the floor to Marion Kraske, and I would like to say some words for every of the speakers. She studied political sciences, economics, and Slavic studies, was a journalist for the German press agency, the first German television, the German news magazine Der Spiegel at the foreign desk for a couple of years. After that was the director for a Spiegel office in Vienna covering the Western Balkans. Her research focus was on history, reconciliation, right-wing extremism, and state and nation building processes. From 2009, worked as a trainer and consultant for various stakeholders, NGOs, institutions, worldwide companies. She specialized in diversity and conflict management, intercultural competence, and media professionalization. For 6 years until this year, she was working as a managing director of Heinrich Böll Stiftung office in Sarajevo, responsible for Bosnia and Herzegovina, North Macedonia, and Albania. Distinguished political analyst, journalist, and media expert. We are glad to have you here with us, Mrs. Kraske. Please share your thoughts about how public discourse is affected by this radical rhetoric and hate speech, and do you detect some recipes or cures to mend this pain that all of our societies have?
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. We had really a great cooperation with Civil in my time for Heinrich Böll in the Balkan region, and I'm really glad that you're covering this really very sensitive and relevant topic today, which is really of global importance, and that's the reason why I'm happy to give some input. I would like to focus a little bit on the global level, but also on the journalistic perspective. And since we do not have so much time for our input, I would like to start or to reflect a bit this very basic model of democracy. We have these three main pillars. You all know this. This is legislature, then executive powers and judiciary. And in the ideal world of a functioning democracy, we have also the fourth pillar, that is the media pillar, with the tasks of information, delivering information, fact-based information, communication, control, and it's also for the media pillar important to act as a corrective to the people in power, also to the three other pillars I mentioned before. I think really this is very crucial to understand. And when I started my journalistic career some decades ago, we had in Germany the Spiegel Day. That was the Monday. Yeah, the public was waiting for the Monday to be published and to read the most important facts during the week, yeah, and that was delivered by the Spiegel. This changed a lot, yeah, with the upcoming of the internet and the new importance of new platforms and new medias. Actually, I think we saw that this digitalization provided a lot of chances for the media sector, but we have also to state that we are facing disadvantages and risks, since then the news sector and the media sector has changed fundamentally. Nowadays, everybody can infuse his content, so-called news, at any time in the internet. And I think this led to the following consequences. We have a bipolarity. On the first hand, we see a fact-based professional journalism, media content, like always. But on the other hand, we have a flow of fake news, of disinformation, of fake news. And these trends are becoming more and more a global threat to our model of democracy, because it's discrediting, especially also the fourth pillar, the media sector. People are not anymore believing what the professional media sector is providing. It's undermining the democracies, and it's also, I mean, we heard this also from the first panel, it led to several attacks worldwide on journalists that they were just doing their jobs, right, by delivering facts. So people get their information mainly from Facebook, from Instagram, from sources who are quite questionable and who are not really transparent. I would like to focus on 3 examples because I think we have some blueprints how these disinformation machineries are bringing democracies in danger. The first example I would like to mention is the topic of migrants. We saw this in Germany with 2015 and 16 with this high influx of migration. And then the right-wing propaganda machinery started discrediting the migrants, but also discrediting the government, the Merkel government in that case. And even though after 2016 we had a normalization of the situation, still right-wing propaganda was infused in the internet. And it was the main narrative was that, you know, we have a wave of migrants, and that brings Germany as a whole, the European Union, and especially the Christianity in Europe at a risk. So that was what was really important, the fact that Germany is urgently needing workers, for example, 260,000 annual per year. That was not mentioned. That was totally denied. So as a consequence, and this is highly important also, how could we learn from this example, is that we had, as a consequence, a new party, AfD, Alternative für Jematzki, in the German Bundestag right now, as a direct consequence of this right-wing wrong propaganda machinery. We see that the public discourse is highly radicalized. We saw attacks on the Merkel government. Merkel muss weg. She has to be eliminated. And I think this is a really very, very crucial example how also right-wing propaganda and fake news are bringing also traditional democracies under pressure. So coming back to a second example, these were the US elections in 2020. The Trump administration launched a tsunami of fake news during the whole of 4 years of Mr. Trump's time in the White House. But this culminated in the narrative of a stolen election after the election took place. Last year. So the narrative was highly influential, and it was without, you know, any legal and factual base. In contrary, there were studies that this was one of the most secure elections in the history of America. The Republican Party, nevertheless, was supporting these fake news and these wrong narratives. And as a consequence, we saw the coup d'etat on the 6th of January, when really a storm happened, a mob of right-wing extremists, but also ordinary people stormed the Capitol Hill and attacked the police officers and everybody who was in charge to defend the Capitol Hill. So this was a clear attack on state institutions based on this wrong narrative, Stop the Steal. And again, I think we can learn of this as a blueprint, how a functioning democracy at that time is really put under danger only by using a wrong narrative. So cybercrime that was mentioned before is only one thing, I think. We have also to focus and to reflect those propaganda machineries that are coming from the people in power, and especially also in Southeastern Europe. So a third example for, these mechanisms, I would say, was really the Corona pandemic, when we saw that the spreading of fake news, of misinformation was a global phenomenon. Especially, we had a trend that was undermining the confidence in state institutions and in the statements of health experts. We saw this in Germany, we saw this in America, we saw this in Brazil, we saw this really as a worldwide trend, but especially also in the Western Balkan countries. So at the end, we saw two main consequences. There was the denial of the pandemic and the denial of the danger of the virus itself. And we were confronted with conspiracy theories of any kind. And behind that, studies were brought out recently in the US, that these were individuals, but that it was pretty much also organized. Some of these trolls, some of these organized, fake news were coming also from Russia. So as a consequence, we have clearly to state this is a hybrid war. It's a war about facts. And the resistance of broader social groups did not accept, for example, the lockdown rules or the regulations. They didn't have interest in the vaccination. So we saw also in this context a radicalization of the public discourses and destabilization effects. And for sure, this was also mentioned before, for example, in Serbia, we saw a lot of attacks against the governments, partly, but also against journalists and health experts. So I think this also, as a third, topic, was a really crucial example how these mechanisms are working. As a conclusion, and then I would like to end here my input, we really have to state that fake news and disinformation is becoming more and more a global challenge, and therefore we also need global answers. I think it doesn't make any sense just to find a way only to, for example, to fight fake news in Germany. I think really we need global agendas, global networks. We have also to question the position of people in power. When we saw also last year death threats, for example, in Slovenia. This is a EU member state, right? And also there, journalists were being attacked just because they were doing their job. So we clearly have to state this is also a problem within the European Union. And I think we need, first of all, this was mentioned before also on media literacy, on education, but we need also platforms like this to exchange. Political discourses are needed on the problems, and what we need, and that was discussed by me and Jabir recently, I think we should create a network for free media, especially in the region of Southeastern Europe, because this is completely missing so far. And we will proceed with this. Hopefully you will also join us in establishing this network. I think really this could help to make the problem, first of all, visible, and then to work on countermeasures. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Kraske, for this valuable input. I have some comments, but I would like really to go ahead with the agenda. Tijana Cvjetičanin is next on our conference floor. She's a co-creator, editor, and author of 2 fact-checking platforms in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Istinomjer and later in Raskrinkavanje, she's currently working there, a media fact-checking project. Also lead editor of FemFacts, an international fact-checking project of News Mavens, and a member of the advisory board of the International Fact-Checking Networks as of March 2019. Aside from her fact-checking work, she has authored and co-authored several research studies and policy papers in areas such as political accountability, media discourse analysis, media freedoms, EU integrations of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and government transparency and openness. Quite an important portfolio. Mr. Cvjetičanin, I would like you to share some for you to share some of your examples from your everyday work, since you are working in a fact-checking service. I assume, and I know we are quite following you, that you have daily examples of this radical rhetoric and hate speech that tackles basic democratic values and principles. So please go ahead with your thoughts, and perhaps also with some ideas about the cure for our pain. Mrs. Tishanin on the line. Maybe I'm not seeing her on the panel. Maybe she got somehow she turned off the Zoom channel. Then I would go ahead until we get Ms. Cvjetičanin back. I would like to go ahead with our distinguished professor from Macedonia, Professor Snežana Trpevska, has a PhD in communication sciences. Her research interests are social research methodology, sociology of mass communication, critical thinking and media literacy, which was mentioned quite a few times at this conference, media policy and regulation, and journalism studies. She worked as a head of research and strategic development department in the Broadcasting Council, which is now the media agency in our country. It's the regulatory body. She was a lecturer at the School of Journalism and Public Relations and a professor at the Institute of Communication Studies in Skopje, and participated in numerous academic and applied research projects on freedom of expression, media pluralism, media literacy, audience attitude and behavior in relation to media content, media concentration, and broadcasting regulation. She has also quite a lot of experience in ethics in journalism. That's more than enough for our audience and for the other members of the panel, I think, to give her our full attention. Professor Trpevska, we're glad to have you here with us at the panel. Two questions are arising on our discussion today. Which are the most, how to say, dangerous aspects of this radical rhetoric and hate speech, which are endangering democracies through the public discourse? And is there any, from your experience, and you have quite a lot of experience in working in this type of projects, media literacy, confronting hate speech and disinformation, is there any how to say, a solid cure for addressing this pain for our democracies?
Thank you, Petri. Thank you for the invitation to this interesting conference. And I was not able to hear the last questions because there were some technical problems. But anyway, my main focus of my brief discussion would be on where to find the solution, which is the best approach we can adopt to tackle the problem of the influence of new technologies in our societies, and more specifically to the problem of the huge disinformation spread. I'm now more interested, although I have worked a lot in media policy issues and the regulation, I'm more interested on the demand side, on the reasons why audience actually demands for or is receptive to disinformation, to fake news, and so on and so on. There haven't been much studies in our country on these issues. 3 years ago, there was a study commissioned by the regulator, if you remember, a huge survey on the individual levels of media literacy in the country. There are also some other studies that just grasp the issue, the reasons why audience in our country, more specifically, behave or is so much receptive to disinformation, but mainly the knowledge that is achieved in research, in social research in other countries is also explains actually the reasons why the audience behave like this. It is a fact that social media in our countries as well is becoming the main way of accessing news, especially for the younger generations. It is also known that social media continues to contribute to the increasing distribution of user-generated information, which includes false claims, fabricated news, disinformation, conspiracy theories, hate speech, and so on and so on. But before I move to the main points of my discussion, where to find the solution of the problem, let's not forget that this wealth of information and digital news outlets has revolutionized and democratized the politics. The public can scrutinize what politicians are doing in real time and comment on it almost instantly via social networks. So let's not forget the positive aspect of the problem. We are repeating now because we are facing the problem of spread of disinformation and the negative influence this phenomena reflects in our societies. So what's the problem here? The answer seems straightforward. The digital disinformation is a huge problem because for most of the people, it is not easy at all to distinguish credible news from disinformation, fake news or manipulation on social media. So that is the core of the problem. Why people cannot recognize what is credible news, what is disinformation. But the solution of the problem is not straightforward. We can easily describe the problem, but the solution is not simple. Which approach is best one? Whether to apply restrictive or positive measures, whether to ban some content or to work on raising the awareness of the population. So both approaches have their advantages and disadvantages. For example, legislation banning disinformation and fake news may infringe upon individual rights and freedom of speech. And on top of this, online information is extremely hard to regulate because it spreads like wildfire on social media. So it is not a simple solution just to adopt restrictive measures in the regulation. On the other side, campaigns and short-term educational programs can only partially make changes in the awareness and skills of the population to recognize this information. Probably the best solution would be to combine both approaches, to be extremely careful in introducing restrictive measures, but at the same time to implement thorough and long-term interventions in other societal areas, like, for example, the education system, formal education system, then self-regulation, strengthening the role of the family, the professionalization of the media, the role of the civil society sector. So I think that in our countries, actually, what has been achieved so far is more on the civil society sector and on running a comprehensive media literacy campaign, then on engaging in thorough reforms of the formal education system. And that is the problem we are facing now. So we know that media information literacy has become a critical skill since the appearance of the notions of fake news and later disinformation in the public discourse. Today, everyone talks about media information literacy as part of the solution. This is a kind of basic prerequisite to identify, select, understand, and use trustworthy information and to participate in the public discussion. However, my argument here is that media and information literacy cannot be the solution for the problem of the disrupted public discourse if its focus is not on developing critical thinking skills among the population. And this is a very complex and slow process that can only be achieved through a carefully designed reform of the formal education process at all levels. In our country, for example, there have been a huge number of educational programs, awareness-raising campaigns, and various other initiatives. And there are also announcements that media information literacy will be introduced in the formal education system in the beginning of September this year. But my dilemma is, how will these reforms be implemented? Will they be implemented thoroughly based on the scientific evidence gained so far on how through the learning process the individual can adopt a critical, or even better to say scientific way of reasoning, or they will be implemented in a way that only few thematic units in media literacy will be introduced within some social science subjects within the formal education. So I think that the biggest problem with our education today is that it doesn't teach students to think critically. Although there is a widespread consensus regarding what skills constitute critical thinking, as well as substantial research on how those skills can be taught successfully within the formal education process. I don't think that this knowledge has been taken into account while designing the reforms, at least in our country. I don't know what is the situation in other countries in the region. And I'm not optimistic that the solution will be visible soon for that reason. So I will end here this main point of my discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Trpevska, for your valuable input. Next on our list of panelists, I will try to again reach Ms. Cvjetičanin, but I'm not seeing her. Maybe it's with another nickname on the Zoom. Is it Propulsion, or I don't know, but we will go ahead until we get this information with Bojan Kordalov. He's a distinguished expert in senior communication specialist in PR and social media, which is one of the reasons for our pain, let's say. He worked on researches, consultancy, training for institutions, media organizations, civil society organizations. He is quite experienced in digitalization and digital literacy, EU integration. He has a portfolio both in the civil sector and in the governmental sector on this issue. Also certified trainer in multiculturalism. His specialties include digitalization, consultancy, project management, legislation drafting, planning, researching, etc. I wouldn't go much too long, Bojan, but we need your valuable input here because you're quite skillful in social media, especially. What's happening there, and how does this? Where does this discourse emerge from? A little bit also about the targets. There are usual targets. We have one of those at our panel today. And is there any way to confront this phenomenon?
Well, thank you, Petrit. Thank you, and the Civil for this valuable event. And I believe that we will contribute with these questions, discussions, etc., etc. So first of all, I would like to say two things. The first thing is that the majority of the population is actually not part of this process of fake news and hate speech, although those who are doing that are very loud and going at the first place because they are doing really bad job, and we see the consequences in the previous decades of that. Especially we see the consequences now when we live in a digitalized era, when we live in a society which is based on internet technology, spreading the information not just from a village to village or city to city, but around the globe, around the world. But also, we have to mention, this is the second thing, that the social media actually are tools, just tubes. They are not life, they are not media, such as the traditional media, which are led by the journalists, editors, camera persons, etc., etc. These are just tubes. And actually behind each fake news or each hate speech lies or stands a real person with a name and surname. So it's not the social media as itself spreading the fake news or the hate speech, but personality. That's very important as a start of the discussion. I will say that there are two main questions when discussing these very, very important topics. First is how to encourage debate, real debate, without hate speech and without discrimination. That's what we have to answer and try to answer. And the second is how to make the real news, or one of the participants previously said, just news. How to make news and information more worthy or more clickable than the fake news. These are the $1 million questions that we should work on, not just debate, and find the answers, because if we find this answer, we can focus on battling and winning this battle. So I will give one of the answers again with a question. How many of the institutions that you know, all of you here and virtually, actually, or public authorities have moderation policies on their social media accounts? How many of them? Moderation policies that encourage debate, which means they discourage hate speech, discourage fake news, and most important, take concrete measures against this. I'm not talking about negative comments, which means I disagree with your policy, which is fine, which is democracy. But I'm talking about comments with the hate speech, with discrimination, with a lot of fake news. I will say my answer will be almost none. What's yours? You can name it, maybe demand me, or maybe just confirm that that's true. So I don't think there is a need, especially for us here and on the other side of the auditorium virtually, to remind that the hate speech may lead and actually leads towards concrete criminal acts. That's true, because it's most probably that a lot of the people that use hate speech may do something which is really criminal and problematic at that moment or maybe later. But my main topic, and I will give a conclusion with this for today, will be what's the focus, or what public institutions can do in this important fight. Because these two processes, as you have put in this agenda, the hate speech and the disinformation, are really problematic, and we should tackle as a one. So what actually the public institution can do? First is act. They should start acting, not just talking. Acting most in prevention, but also to be more effective in sanctioning all the criminal things that are happening in these two topics. Second, creating atmosphere for debate through inclusiveness, and which will include, that means different opinion, especially different opinion that are different from the actual government parties in power. This is not just for now, it's for the past. It must refer also to the future, because we have to actually agree that democracy means different opinions, but it doesn't mean opinions with a hate speech, discrimination and fake news, but means different opinions, because debate is crucial for the democracy and for fighting these negative topics we are discussing. Third thing, creating moderation policies that we spoke about, because as in the regular criminal law, when we talk about predictability of what you should do or should not do and have a sanction, the same thing should be applied here, which means moderation policies have to clearly state what's not acceptable on the social media of the institutions, of the public authorities, clearly state what's not acceptable because it's going against the law and it's problematic. So which means moderation policies which will encourage debate on arguments, encourage argument, encourage debate on facts and not on hate speech. The fourth thing, I think also the professor before me mentioned the education process, which is really, really important. And I won't take a lot of time to say this because it was mentioned before, but those institutions should be an example in creating inclusive communication and educate how to do it. Because we need more personal, more institutional examples than a debate. And the fifth, and the final advice, which will help us fight and battle these two negative phenomena, is giving professional, timely public services. So each public institution must give professional services because that will lead towards satisfactions to all citizens, which will make fake news, but also hate speech really, really decreasing, because giving equal access to everyone, which is really important. Taking steps, concrete steps against discrimination, which leads through the example that public institutions should do, can make the change. Actually, I strongly believe that this is just one part, but as a start of discussion, this will be the main start for our journey, and it will help us to win these two battles. One against the fake news, and the second against hate speech and discrimination, which are really problematic and which combined together makes the society looks like it looks now. And if we do not take concrete measures now, that means that maybe later will be too late.
Thank you, Bojan, for this valuable input. And speaking of the damage that can these two let's say big topics of fake news and disinformation, and the other one of hate speech and discrimination and radical offensive rhetoric on the social networks. We have a typical example of a distinguished activist from North Macedonia, Mersiha Smailovic, coming from Legis, an organization quite prominent in working with helping migrants. You were there during the whole refugee crisis and the several waves. She raised her voice against the disrespect of human rights, in particular in these cases of migrants and refugees, but also in other fields. Also, their organization is popular for its humanitarian work. In the last several years, unfortunately, she is also a prominent victim of frequent orchestrated hate speech and fake news attacks on social networks. Mersiha, welcome to our conference and our panel. Please share your experiences. You have also litigated some of these cases in front of the public prosecutor, reported some cases to the police. Are there any outcomes, and what do you propose as a person who deals with these issues every day? What do you propose is the main way forward, let's say?
Thank you, Petrit, for the introduction, and thank you, Civil, for this very important conference and a very important topic. The hate speech is very actually happening on the Balkans, like the previous session. Several speakers mentioned the Balkan and the countries in the Balkan region who are more fragile to this fake news and this hate speech, who affect everyone, affect the society, affect the human rights approach, but also make our democracy fragile. Because we see on the era of the fake news, on the era of the hate speech, you see how the principles of human rights being put outside. As you mentioned, my personal case, but the groups that I'm focus of protection, it's a perfect example. It's basically a case study that we can speak, I can work in the university or the professors to do a research. I will just mention a very interesting moment about the refugee crisis and the migration issue. In 2015, when the Macedonia was part of this huge wave, like so-called the Balkan route, 2 refugee camps were made on our land, one on the border with Greece, one border with Serbia, and we had previously 2 refugee camps, asylum center and center for foreigners. So that was 2015, when it was the previous government on power. So millions of refugees and migrants cross our Balkan route. We changed the law, which make more respectful for the human rights and dignity of the refugees and migrants. But in 2017, when the same political party was in opposition, it started a huge campaign with hate speech and fake news against the refugees and migrants, saying that if this government on the local election win, it will build refugee camps on
5 million
Yes.
refugees were mentioned that would come to Macedonia.
We would be the largest community in the earth that has a place for the refugees and migrants. What was this case? And we were trying, like you said, what's the solution for the fake news? We think it's a counter-argument. Countering the arguments is the solution. But what happened in 2017? We felt speechless. We thought that we are in some hall and we speak like, no, the camps are finished. It was built in 2015. That government at that time built this refugee camp, so it's finished, but nobody wanted to listen. It was a huge campaign. It was not only on the social media. It was collecting signatures on the street. It was making, in one session in the assembly of the Macedonian, when the people there are paid from our money, 87 times was mentioned the word migrant in one session. So it was not only fake news or on the social media, like you mentioned the tool. It was huge, organized, massive propaganda against the refugees and migrants. So what that meant? It meant the dehumanization of the refugees and migrants. So after the local election 2017, everything went down forward. So for us to raise empathy toward refugees and migrants now, it's very hard, because everybody sees them as they will come, they will invent our country, they will build. So every new building that is built in our country, it's taken by the political parties and said, this will be the new refugee camp, this is migration camp, this is etc. So they are preventing normal functioning. So what is happening? We have Center for Foreigners. In all the European Commission reports, it's mentioned that we have to have better conditions in the Center for Foreigners. It means foreigners, like everyone, not Macedonian citizen, it's a foreigner. But it's preventing to do so, to build new building, because this one is in very crowded municipality, Chai, and very crowded area called Gazibaba, so you cannot pass. So it should be built outside the city, but it's prevented because even this political government, it's a political. So they are scared about how the influence and this hate speech, and so they are preventing this building a new place. It will be more humane and more better for the foreigners who will be in this detention center, because they are afraid of the narrative that you will build a camp, they will build camp. So now we have a very huge effect of the human rights of the refugees, but also for us as a civil society, it affects the empathy and solidarity. So if you want to do the hate speech toward one group, you have to first dehumanize them. So when you remove the human aspect of them, you treat them as a group, as a collective movement, they will enter your country, then it's very easy to attack them with hate speech. So also me being vocal on this area of the hate speech toward refugees, but also the Islamophobia which is rising on the Balkan, which is very interesting to have Islamophobia today in 21st century, when we are here as the Balkan, as such a diverse place with many ethnicity works, lives and function. We have mosque for 6 centuries in Macedonia. To have rising of Islamophobia now, when you have in New Zealand the terrorist attack of the Christian church community place, then you become more scared, because the attack that happens on me are several characteristics. It's because of my vocal speaking about the refugees and migrants, because my visible representation of the faith. They also attacks because of my gender. I was attacked because women with headscarf cannot be politically active. Then I was attacked of my ethnicity. When there was a Srebrenica, because I'm Bosniak nationality, there was some political party who said, if you attack me because of me, do you want again to happen Srebrenica? So he used this in month when we really feel, I don't know, some emotionally moved. So yes, I start several initiatives. I went to the public prosecution, I went to the Ministry for Interior, I also have my personal lawsuit against some not social media, but basically newspapers. Until several cases that I mentioned, I have only one finished. It's my personal lawsuit against 2 publishing houses that they do they apologize at the court, but still the sentence.
It was the case for slander and libel,
yes,
I guess.
It was the case of when I was attacked that I'm anti-Semite. So the editor of the newspaper said that he deliberately said for me that I'm anti-Semitic and start this whole campaign for anti-Semitism. Also, I'm a trainer for anti-Semitism, so I really know how and what is the anti-Semitism. So he apologized, and I'm expecting the verdict to have it in my hands so that I can publicly announce. But that is not only this newspaper, but also a political party, which has a lot of followers, organized several press conferences against me. What's that important? Because I'm a member of civil society. So if a political member, if somebody member of the assembly attack a member of the civil society, that is a very huge attack, because they also send a message and make you fragile, and you are scared to go outside because 300, I don't know how much followers this the highest political opposition in our country has. So the fake news and hate speech personally affect you, send you some message that you have to be quiet. You are scared to enter into social media. You're scared to write your own opinion on the social media because you're afraid that they will use it, misuse it, and they will attack you because of your freedom of speech. And I'm civil society member. I work in the private sector, so I'm not a governmental institution. I'm not politician. So that is very important and something that happens maybe 6 years for me now.
Would you encourage other people to take legislation measures? Because, I mean, obviously you say that only one of the cases worked, but that still one of the cases worked. Maybe this is one of the solutions, to litigate these people, to litigate these political parties and make them apologize or even take harder consequences for their acts.
When I start the procedure through the governmental bodies, to the ministry, because it's a criminal code, it's an article in the criminal code, so I cannot do my personal, I cannot
They have to do it ex
civil.
officio.
Yes, it have to go through the criminal code and criminal court. I wanted to say publicly to the people, don't try this. Because it's very hard, it's very painful to go to the public prosecutor office, to have at your home coming police officer bringing you invitation to come to their office. You know, for us as a family, this was very disturbing to have police big car coming, and they say, you're Marsiha, you are invited tomorrow to police station, and you are the victim in all these places. You go to the public prosecution office, and they were not trained how to deal with the victims, and she was attacking me. And at the end of my interview, she told me like, "Come on, Marsiha, leave social media behind. You have kids. Take care of your kids. Take care of your home. Be a housewife." Like that, she said to me literally. And that passed 1 year and a half. Nothing happened. So I was in the public prosecutor office. I went to the Ministry for Interior. So nothing happens. Even the attacker who did a personal attack on me by name and surname, by my ethnicity, my religion, my pointing my family, he still has his Facebook page, Facebook profile. He still received salary from our budget that we give, and he's not even, any process hasn't started against him. And yesterday he also again had this hate speech, this rhetoric of Islamophobia and xenophobia on the social media, and you report to the Ministry of Interior and nothing happens. Nothing happens. So the institution has the biggest point of them to show them that they have to do more. Also, we as a civil society, we do more with empathy, with solidarity, with countering argument, but the institutions are very silent in Macedonia when we speak about hate speech and fake news. This is very disturbing to know.
We hope that will change. Next on our panel is Mr. Vladimir Georgievsky, who is the head of the local branch of RAICO, the Regional Youth Cooperation Office in North Macedonia. They are quite active in youth networking and quite prominent in our country and also countries in the region. His youth work extends to over 13 years, working with youth problems and challenges. His experience includes working on youth engagement, natural protection, intercultural education, employment for youth, social entrepreneurship, but also on conflict transformation, fighting hate speech, which is one of our topics of discussion, and migration issues, where you have some similar experience, I believe, with Mersiha. Mr. Georgievsky, thank you for coming at the panel. I hope you will share some of your insight on the issues and some of proposals for way forward. Please go ahead.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your great work that you are doing in this conference. I think it's very important, and we need more of this kind of conferences and events. And working on this topic, I think this is good start that we discuss, and hearing all this previous experts and speakers, I will just add some things. I will try not to repeat what the previous guest said. But generally, we are living in the 21st century where informations are going so fast, and information is power, but informations are very easily, people are manipulating with that information. And that's why I personally believe that we need more regulations, state regulation, but also maybe regional and European regulations, because we can see what politicians are doing. If we go analyze Hungary, Turkey, and here, and what was happening previous with how many journalists ended up in prisons, and many people because they were saying against some politicians, or they were true facts. But nowadays also we have to see journalists in the media platforms. We have to also analyze. People have to be generally more critical to analyze the structure, who is owning that medias, why they are having these medias, are they really earning from the medias, from them, or they have several companies behind, so why are they saying what they are saying? And generally, Western Balkans divided society, medias are influencing a lot, unfortunately more in dividing people still than uniting people. And we have to teach, especially starting from youth, what the previous expert said, to think analytically, critically, and between the lines, to see what the media is trying to say. And because we have a lot of cases, unfortunately, it's not just Mersiha, and most of us have been on the medias by trying to attack us with fake news or lies. In that sense, RAICO is started to work on this topic. We had more than 50 stories created by young journalists from their reality. We had, for example, student who was writing about how is life in dormitory, or how COVID influences the online education, how is in that way. But generally, we need more and more stories that unite us in the media than divide us, and especially the power of not just formal education, but also non-formal and informal. We have to really focus there, because RAICO is giving some projects on media education. There is one training that is dealing with that, but it's just a start. We need more funds. We need more focus. And if we look at our media, if you look how many serial movies we have. If I remember when I was teenager, it was movies that were really educating us. There were some more educational story than they are now. Now it's the narratives, and they are creating big narratives there. So that we need to focus on more and more. And we have to work with several groups like sport fans, like religious leaders, social media influencers, political leaders, especially youth wings, to educate them how to use the media properly. Because if we just use it to manipulate each other, then we will just be in the same place or go back, and we will have more and more youth migration because it also influences a lot. Thank you, Vladimir, for your valuable input. I think this is a good message for the youth also, to get engaged but be very careful. I wouldn't like to use any more of your time because we were a little bit delayed with the start of the conference, and it pushed the agenda a bit further, but I would still like to give the opportunity or the floor to all the participants at this conference. If they have a small intervention or a point in 30 seconds, in a journalistic format, please raise your hand so I can see you. I think Amina Shurkovic is I see a raised hand at Amina from Bedem, and then is there anybody else from the speakers who would like to join us with his final thoughts? Amina, please go ahead. Our technician will unmute you, or unmute yourself now so that you give us your brief point at the end. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay, I would just like to ask a question. I have a question for Mersiha, but also for the others maybe who have been a victim in the same way as she is. Do you have or do you feel any support from the civil organization and from the other activists from your country or even from the region?
Please, Mersiha.
Thank you, Amina, for the question. Like I said, since I was attacked with several characteristics, so I have to say that the most support I gained when I was attacked of my gender perspective, when I was attacked that as a woman I cannot be part of political movement, then the feminist movement was very loud and very strong on the social media. Otherwise, it's not so much huge support from the civil society movement. It's more personal activists, professors, and just approach to you. But sometimes the attacks are so loud, are so strong that people are even afraid to do some public solidarization, so they send you messages and private messages. But it's not so much so supportive as it should be.
I must say that besides civil and several organizations that we always stand by Mersiha's activism because we believe in its genuinity, there is quite a lot of fear in our civil society, especially because it has been under attack for so many years, especially during the previous government. People were from the civil society were dubbed as traitors, Sorosoids, foreign mercenaries, etc. So quite a lot of people in the civil society choose to go under the radar of the nationalists and national chauvinists, especially or people who spread radical religious hate speech or gender-based hate speech. So this is one of the things that we have to change. We have to be more and more supportive of people coming from our sector, not only. Every citizen is important. We had just a case a couple of days ago where a poet was attacked on Facebook because he said some words about the radical rhetoric of a politician. Then half an hour later he received a fake profile by his name on Facebook, and that fake profile started speaking as the poet with very offensive, harsh hate speech against Muslims, Bosniaks, Albanians, Roma, etc. And we discovered this case, we reported it to the police. As you mentioned, we have to make the institutions work and deal with these issues because it's their job when these criminal acts happen
to tackle these issues. Any other intervention from the panelists? Please raise your hands or so I can see you. And if there is not, I would like to give the floor again to the President of Civil, Mr. Javier Derala, to conclude this conference. Please, Javier, here you go.
Thank you. Actually, I would like you to conclude this exquisite event, but I'd like to only make a couple of points that I somehow missed at the end of the first session because we were running out of time. One point I would like to make is that there is a need for the institutions to start doing their job. As simple as that. That's one thing. The other thing is that we need to see more support for the independent media, but also for the progressive groups and the individuals in the society. We need to see media that have clear and unambiguous editorial policy that is progressive, that is decisively countering fake news, disinformation, hate speech, black propaganda, or etc., which are the main tools or the most visible tools of the hybrid warfare that is being waged. And then I'd like to also stress the point that the government have to be accountable and have to be held accountable for their silence and for their actions, whether for good or for the bad. And of course, I'd like to, at the very end, if I may, thank the whole team of Civil and the whole team of Balkan Forum, who really worked very hard for this to happen. And it's not going to be the end, or it will be the first but not the last conference on this topic. And I'd like to help the desk of Civil and also the contributor, the colleague of my friend Astrid, who came from Pristina and worked on this. And I'd like to especially thank Dehran and Aryan, who took care of this to happen in the best possible way. And especially to all participants, to all speakers who really took their time to contribute to this important event for us. Thank you very much, and here's the floor back to you.
Thank you very much, Javier, for this intervention. I wouldn't take any much more of your time. Thanks to the audience also who were following us for these 2 and more hours on our channel, Facebook channel of Civil, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube and other media platforms. Please stay with us during these days because we will be transcribing all of the points of our distinguished speakers, and they will be consequently put on our web platforms. Thank you all again for participating, for sharing your experiences, for attending the press conference and the live stream. We hope to see you very soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Civilmedia.mk. Slobodno, nezavisno, otvoreno.